Now that came as a bit of a surprise. A year after Boris Johnson's departure, Britain's Conservatives are stuck in a seemingly permanent low. Their government seems unimaginative and powerless, and yet they hold Boris Johnson's old constituency, for which a new MP had to be elected last Thursday. You might have seen my video generally on this. And this is all the more remarkable given that they lost the other two by-elections on the same day. The Labour opposition, who seemed very certain of their victory in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, now have to take a look at themselves. The number one problem is quickly identified. London's Labour city government is planning to expand the ULEZ, the ultra-low emission zone, from the city centre to the whole city of London, including the outskirts. And this means anyone who has a car that is not low enough in emissions will have to pay £12.50, and that's for a day from the end of August to be allowed to drive it. It's easy to imagine what low-income people displaced by gentrification on the outskirts of London might think. The ULEZ daily driving charge, not socially graded, is as politically insensitive as Margaret Thatcher's poll tax once was. Its extension by London's Labour city government just ahead of Britain's likely 2024 election year is a godsend for the Tories. The previous style of Tory Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, working competently and unspectacularly in the hope that someone will notice that, has achieved little political achievement so far. But now some Conservatives are confronted with a tempting alternative just in time for the 2024 elections: social populism against climate policy. In 2016, Brexit prevailed with a pattern the left behind against the elite, and the Tories won a high election victory in the last election in 2019 under Boris Johnson. And now, Boris Johnson may have retired from British politics for the time being, but his political legacy lives on. So if you drive a car with high emissions through London, you have to pay. From August, the environmental zone should also improve the air in the outskirts. But now Major Sadiq Khan is under pressure from his own party leadership because of a potential Tory campaigning. Anyone who wants to promote environmental and climate protection will lose elections. The major British parties seem to have learned this, and that's a lesson from the by-election on Thursday in West London. And the ultra-low emission zones, comparable to the German environmental zones here, but with fees instead of driving bans for older vehicles, became the dominant topic of the debate at the weekend. The Sunday Times and the Financial Times reported that London Mayor Sadiq Khan from the Labour Party was about to make a U-turn. He was now ready to make corrections to the plan to expand the ULEZ in the centre of the capital to practically the entire city area at the end of August. And Khan said he was in constructive listening mode. In principle, he continues to insist on driving high-emission vehicles off the roads. And for the daily fees of £12.50, a stronger compensation is being considered, such as more money for a scrapping bonus, which should help when replacing old cars. The group of beneficiaries could also expand beyond the needy and small businesses. According to reports, party leader Keir Starmer had increased the pressure on Khan in a direct conversation. The mayor had previously vehemently rejected criticism of the plan, even after Starmer publicly stated that the ULEZ issue was without a doubt to blame for the Labour election defeat there. On Thursday, the Social Democratic Party narrowly missed out on a historic triumph. The Conservatives narrowly defended the constituency of Uxbridge and South Ruislip on the outskirts of London, which had previously been held by former Prime Minister Johnson, as I said. And they have held the majority there since 1970. But this year, in the polls, Labour was ahead. The disappointment that it didn't work out was all the greater, and both parties see the issue of the environmental zone as decisive for the election, although the Labour candidate also spoke out against it during the election campaign. But the Conservatives' campaign covered the constituency with the motto, "No ULEZ," which is very funny, by the way, but I'll come back to that later. The Conservative Tories now see an opportunity to turn their own loss of votes into a win and turn anti-national sentiment ahead of the next general election. MP Jacob Rees-Mogg called on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to distance from unpopular, expensive green policies. As an example, the party's internal climate skeptic faction, Net Zero Scrutiny Group, cited the end of new cars with internal combustion engines planned in Great Britain for 2030. Building Secretary Michael Gove warned on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph that the climate policy would be seen as a religious crusade where the good and the bad would be separated. For such campaigns, one simply shouldn't provide the rivals with templates. That is what Labour leader Keir Starmer said then. If something ends up on every single Conservative Tory leaflet, then we're doing something damn wrong, is what he told party officials. The media quoted an unnamed member of Starmer's shadow cabinet from the meeting as saying that ULEZ is a policy that saves 500 lives a year but costs voters. If there was ever a policy that needed to be reconsidered, this is it. Climate activists like naturalist Chris Peckham reacted with horror. Do they want to protect humanity and the rest of life on Earth, or just get into office, is what he asked on Times Radio. The swaying was also registered abroad. And Khan's actions in London are exemplary. That was said by Milan Mayor Giuseppe Sala, and he told this to The Guardian. Such climate and public health leaders should be supported at all levels of government. At the beginning of the year, the city's transport authority presented a scientific study on the success of the ULEZ. According to this, the concentration of toxic nitrogen oxides in the city centre, where the ULEZ was introduced in 2019, has been reduced by almost half. Within the Ring Road, where the zone was extended in 2021, the value has improved by 21%. Everyone has the right to breathe clean air, is what Sadiq Khan said, and therefore 5 million Londoners in the outskirts should also benefit from it. Khan, himself an asthmatic, has taken up the cause of the traffic U-turn as a contribution to social justice. His programmatic book entitled Breathe was recently published. According to the traffic authority, about every 10th vehicle on the outskirts of the city would be affected by the new fees, mostly older petrol engines built up to around 2005 and diesel engines built up to around 2015. 5 conservatively governed districts have filed a lawsuit against the expansion of the ULEZ, and a verdict is expected in the coming week. And the irony of history here is, the initiative for the environmental zone originally came from Khan's predecessor as mayor. And who was that? Not mayor as mayor. But who was that? That was Boris Johnson. Tory Boris Johnson. And now the Tories were using this in a campaign in his former constituency against Labour. So that is quite a joke of history here. But of course you can change your mind if you think you've done something wrong. But in the end, with the results of the air quality, it was not wrong. But the question you have to ask yourself is, how do you do it? We were talking about a road tax here in my hometown as well. And the laws here were differently, because older cars that couldn't get the certificate for a certain emissions level were just not allowed to drive into the city. And that was probably not hurting as much as a daily fee. Take £12.50 times, I don't know, 26, 28, depending on how often you have to work in city centre or whatever, and not talking about craftsmen here. But if you have to go to work and pay this for God knows what, 28 days or whatever you need, how should a family with a low income, with those rent prices in London, and I know what I'm talking about, and that's quite some time ago, and the rent prices were insane there already. How do you want to pay for this? It will probably be easier to force people to use the tube or whatever by not allowing their car into certain parts of the city. But that is definitely a topic to be reconsidered. But it's a joke that the Tories are using something they set up themselves against Labour. But Labour is in a difficult position. I said this in my last live stream again as well. There's not much where you see a difference between the Tories and Labour at the moment. And that, from my taste, is the biggest issue for Labour if they want to win this election. If you can't say this is Tory manifesto, this is Labour manifesto, or when Starmer and Sunak answer on a certain question, they sound exactly the same. And that's a problem for Labour, because Sunak already is in office. And so Labour will really have to step up and make clear what they want to do differently to the current government if they want to win the election. And if you want to know more about the current politics in the UK or about Brexit, which is a big topic on this channel, the next video is here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.